Hello, Year 8, and welcome to today's lesson. I'd like you to start by having a look at this image here. This is a coin taken from the Ashmolean collection in Oxford. What does it show? Where is this person? Well, if we look at the Latin inscription around the coin, we'd see it says Rex. Hopefully remember that Rex is the Latin for king. Can you see the name of the king? Carolus. That means King Charles. Now, where is it? Can you spot these key features below the king? We've got some towers, a river, and the word Oxon. Oxon means Oxfordshire. And these towers are parts of the university. So the tall one, that's Magdalen Tower. The centre one, we've got an image of the Bodleian. And of course at the bottom we've got the Thames River. This artefact is known as the Oxford crown. Now a crown is an old type of currency. Charles made this coin when he fled London, abandoned his capital and turned Oxford into his new capital. We're going to learn a little bit more about this later on in the lesson. Today's lesson is focusing on what life was like in Oxford during the English Civil War. It was a really important city because here is where the king set up his new capital and ran his war effort from. Today's lesson is based on a series of clips and artefacts from the Ashmolean Museum in Oxford. I'd really recommend having that up alongside today's YouTube lesson to watch alongside. First thing I'd like you to do is go to the Ashmoleans YouTube image and website even, and watch the first clip, which is an introduction to Oxford in the Civil War. Now we can't go out today and take you round Oxford, so we're going to have to give you a virtual tour instead. Here's a modern day map to show us where we're going to be going in our Oxford tour. Perhaps once this is all over, you can go to the Ashmolean and do this yourself. Stop number 1 in our tour of Civil War Oxford is Christ Church College. Follow the YouTube clip at the bottom here to learn about what Christ Church College was doing during the English Civil War. You probably know it as the big college in the centre where they filmed some of Harry Potter. It's right beside the big meadow, Christ Church Meadows. Now Christ Church became the centre of the King's Court in Oxford. This is where he lived. Now, given the fact that they just fled from their capital city, London, you might have thought that maybe the king would be not really thinking about luxury and court life, but he'd be focused on winning the war. But what do we know about this king? He believed himself to have been appointed by God. So he was really keen to maintain all his dignity as king. And this includes a level of luxury. So whilst the king lived in Christ Church, the Queen lived in Merton College, which you can see here. In these colleges, they continued normal court life. Feasting, hunting, attended on by loads of different servants. They brought their entertainers and they brought their cavaliers, Charles's supporters. Now, the Cavaliers quickly became quite a nuisance in the city. They lived in normal people's houses in Oxford. They were billeted in them. And the people of Oxford did not like this. These Cavaliers were not very well behaved, and the people of Oxford also resented having to feed them, house them, the cost of that, on top of paying huge taxes to help the king win the war. So, I'd like you now to use the information here to answer the 5 questions on the slide. Let's look in a bit more detail at how the king and queen lived. The queen had so many courtiers, that is, members of her court, that she couldn't fit in Christchurch College too. Now, Christchurch is absolutely massive. So to not be able to fit in there shows you how many people the Queen must have had waiting on her and serving on her. That's why she went to Merton College and set up her own course in Merton. In the Queen's court, there were courtiers including her court dwarf, her sons, Prince Charles and Prince James, and her huge number of pets, including her favourite little spaniel, Mate. If you go to Merton College today, you can see bricked up a passageway that was made to connect Merton and Corpus Christi so that the king could travel to see the Queen without ever actually having to go out into the public streets. Could you now answer these 3 questions? We're now moving on to New Inn Hall Street. Now, if you know Oxford at all, New Inn Hall Street is the street that you would walk between to move from the Odeon Cinema or near the market if you wanted to go up to the new fancy Westgate Shopping Centre. New Inn Hall Street, however, in the English Civil War, was the site of a hospital. So we're going to start looking at what medicine was like during the Civil War. Now, it's often the case that war accelerates progress in medicine. That is, that medicine seems to improve really quickly at times of war. And that's often because medics have to innovate and experiment to deal with all the horrible new treatments and diseases they face during a war. And the English Civil War was no different. It forced people to find new ways to deal with the awful wounds they were seeing. Your task now is to read these 2 pages of information about medicine in the English Civil War. I then want you to sort each box into one of 3 columns. Some information describes the kind of diseases and injuries that soldiers suffered during the war. Some of them explain why these diseases happened, the cause of that disease. And some describe the treatments that soldiers had. So if we look, for example, on our first slide, we've got scurvy was a disease which resulted from a poor diet. I would therefore put that information into our diseases first column because it's telling me one of the diseases that came about. But where else can I put it? I could also put it in causes of disease, couldn't I? Because scurvy results from a poor diet. So cause of disease, I could put poor diet. Do your best to sort all the information into one of the 3 columns. Now, as well as a hospital, New Inn Hall Street also had a mint. Now, you might think of mint as in minty fresh for your toothpaste, but that's not what we mean here. A mint is a place where you make money. So it's still today the Royal Mint that makes our coins. We looked at this image of the Oxford crown that Charles minted whilst he was in Oxford. I'd like you to have a go completing this image to explain what we can see on his Oxford crown. Now we're moving on to Gloucester Green. Today, Gloucester Green is a market, or it's also the place where you get the buses in Oxford. But it was a bit different during the Civil War. Again, watch the Ashmolean YouTube video to learn more about what Gloucester Green was like at this time. If you look in the corner of Gloucester Green, you'll be able to find this little plaque. The plaque is to the memory of Private Biggs and Private Piggin, executed like their leveller colleagues at Burford by forces loyal to Cromwell. They were shot near this place for their part in the second mutiny of the Oxford garrison on the 18th of September 1649. Now, it's really interesting that we remember this moment in history. Levellers were a new political movement that grew up during the Civil War. They grew up particularly amongst the soldiers. Now, Levellers started to believe in some very radical politics, very radical for the 17th century. As their name suggests, leveller, they believed all men should be levelled, that is, they should be equal. They started to demand votes for all free men, religious tolerance, that is, not hating on anyone or persecuting them for their religion, and everyone being treated equally before the law. Now, at Banbury, a group of levellers mutinied. That is, they rose up against their officers in the army. That's because they felt their army leaders weren't trying to bring about the equality they wanted. Quickly, however, the Leveller rebellion was crushed, and many of them were imprisoned at Oxford Castle. Now, you may have been to Oxford Castle before. It's in the heart of Oxford. If you look at the big hill in the centre of Oxford, the castle has been used not only as a castle but as a prison, and that's what it was used as in the Civil War as well. Now, when the Levellers went to Oxford Castle, they sparked a new mutiny, and the two ringleaders, Private Biggs and Private Piggin, just as we read in the little plaque there, were executed for their role in bringing about the mutiny. They were executed by firing squad, that is, they were shot at Gloucester Green, and that's what's commemorated. So, please can you now answer these 6 questions on the Oxford Leveller Mutiny? That takes us to the end of our tour of Oxford during the Civil War. I'd like you to finish today's lesson by naming 3 activities taking place in Oxford during the Civil War. I'd like you to name the 2 colleges which housed the King and Queen, and write a sentence to answer the question: would you have wanted to visit Oxford during the Civil War? Why?